Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, whenever and however you are listening to the podcast. We just appreciate that you are. This is the Delaware High School Football Pod, presented by Websites for Sports, and we're the only media outlet dedicated exclusively to high school football here in the state of Delaware. The pod is available wherever you listen to your podcast and also on YouTube for those who prefer to see what you're listening to. Follow us on Twitter at DELHS Football and on Facebook at the DELHS Football Pod. And Marty, it's good to see you. Good to see you on YouTube. We haven't seen each other in a while in person, so good to see you on YouTube.
No, it's great to be back. It's been a long, hot summer, and it's exciting. Yesterday was the first day of college football. We had 7 games in college football, so it was a good start. You know, we had Notre Dame Navy in Dublin, Ireland, which turned out to be a dud.
Yeah, that was a good game for about the first 4 minutes.
Yeah, exactly.
I was
at that point. My mom and I became more interested in the commercial intros and outros when they showed the landscape of Ireland. We were more excited about that than the actual game itself. So,
and I saw more of Joe Montana than I've seen since he played in the NFL.
Oh my goodness, I know. Yeah, one thing that Notre Dame does is bring back the alums. Good Lord. So it'll be fun. Yeah, we're looking forward. Our first week of high school football starts this Thursday. So it's a lot of fun. We're both pretty excited about it.
And week 0 is going to be here, basically. The teams that are playing for week 0, and we'll talk about that in a minute.
I mean, week 1.
Week 1. Yeah, well, right. That's what it should be. I don't know when they're going to.
You and I know 0. We don't get it.
Now, does college have a week 0? Did I see that
somewhere?
They
do. Yesterday, they advertised as week 0. Yes, I do not understand it. I don't know what the fixation is with it.
I don't know. I'm hoping that's something that somebody changes, at least here in Delaware, because it just it confuses the heck out of people. What it does. So. Well, we got some new things this year, too. We got 6 new sponsors. You'll hear about them throughout the time, including our Websites for Sports folks and how great they are. I'll talk about them in just a second. Another new thing we're going to do is we're going to split some segments up into separate podcasts and also separate YouTube videos, because we think that some people, some of the feedback we've gotten and ourselves and what our habits are when we do listen to podcasts and YouTube things is, we might like to hear a segment either again, or we might like to send a certain segment to somebody. And if you send them an hour, there's nothing more frustrating. A friend of mine did this to me the other day. He sent me a Bob Uecker thing. He said, you got to hear this. It's only 7 minutes long. But it was in the middle of a 1-hour show. It was back from the Johnny Carson days. So I turned it on, and I'm listening to everything about Johnny Carson, and it's not like it's a bad listen.
Right,
but I don't have time, and I don't care to listen to Johnny Carson. I want to hear the Bob Uecker interview. And so I turned it off. But that's the impatience part of me. But, there's some segments like the Grain Gridiron Player of the Week, top performances, that type of thing, that we'll send out to you separately, including our random thoughts. That's a new thing Marty and I are going to do at the end of every podcast, is we're going to give you our random thoughts on something in the world of sports. And it might be something you've never heard of. It might be something you don't care about. It might be an opinion of ours that we just want to put out on the air. But it's something we thought would be fun to do. And so I'm also going to have some trivia and more on that later, where you can win prizes here from the podcast. So one other thing we're going to think about is bringing on guests to the podcast, whether it's a media person, coaches, who knows, maybe players, somebody who's just interested in high school football. We're going to explore that and see how that works out. And if we do that, we would put that out in a separate segment as well. We also want to be respectful of your time. And keep the podcast within a reasonable listening time. We have people tell us, hey, we listen on the way to work, that first half of it, and we listen to the second half on the way home from work on Monday mornings. And so, that's the kind of thing that we're trying to keep in touch first. But the title sponsor of the Delaware High School Football Pod this year is Websites for Sports, the only place you can find the schedule of every high school team in the state of Delaware. It's mandatory that they put those schedules up there. Brian Rudder started this site more than a decade ago. It's probably been closer to 2 decades. And to be honest, I'm not sure what we did before this came out. Websites for Sports has the schedule of every middle school and high school team in the state. And on that schedule, it tells you the home team, the away team, and the location of the game. And if you click on the location of the game, it gives you a map right to Google Maps. It also gives you the coaching staff information for each school, including email addresses if you need them. Some of them put their phone numbers down there, depending on the coach. It's really a one-stop shop for high school schedules. And here's my favorite feature, Marty. If you go to the homepage at websitesforsports.com, not only are you going to see our podcast logo and a link to that, which is very cool. We appreciate Brian Rudder doing that. And that's a number 4. Website's the number 4 sports.com. I should have declared that right away. If you go to the right side of that, there's a yellow box. And if you click on that yellow box, you can sign up for the scheduled sport of anything And in other words, what they do then is they notify you if a schedule changes. And so it's great for you and me just for football, because we see if something gets changed. We don't give our listeners misinformation, that type of thing. But me as a dad who's got a kid playing several different sports and someone in the band who relies on the football schedule, it's great for me to see when a schedule changes. And so that's just one of the things that's great about this site. Other than, like I said, if you want information about games, coaching staffs, or rosters, it's the only place you're guaranteed to get it all. So if you have a child playing it, it's Websites for Sports. That's websites, the number 4 sports.com. And we can't thank them enough for what they do for high school sports and, of course, for sponsoring the podcast. It's just another way they are supporting interscholastic athletics. All right, let's get into the nuts and bolts of the podcast here. Lots to talk about, Marty, and we tried to figure out how we can, we don't want to be repetitive. We don't want to talk about things everybody already knows about or that they've heard about. But there are some very important changes this year. One is the change in classes. The class system 1, 2, and 3 came into effect 2 years ago. They said after 2 years, we're going to reevaluate everything. That's going to become a 2-year process. Similar to what they used to do every 2 years is when you could change from Division I to Division II or vice versa, depending on the population of your school. But as we all know, this class system is not based on the population of your school. It's based on how good your team is traditionally. And that's the way it should be. So let's start with 1A. It went from 14 to 16 teams. This was the easy one. It was an obvious thing that Laurel was going to move up. They want to move up. They want to play better teams. They won 2 state championships. Nobody touched them for 2 years in 1A. And Odessa moved up because they're going to be a 3A team eventually. If not after the next 2 cycles, 2-year cycle, certainly after the one after that. I would guess very good chance after the next 2 years, they're going to be bumped up to 3 and somebody's going to be relegated down. But anyway, so those were 2 easy ones, Laurel and Odessa up. And then down in 1A was AI DuPont, easy one, didn't have a team last year. Brandywine, easy one, 0-9. Conrad struggled last couple years. McCain struggled last couple years. So anything stick out to you that shouldn't have happened, or, any thoughts on 1A?
No, I actually thought Odessa was the only team in the state of Delaware that requested to move up. And when you look at their numbers, Dan Pritchard sent us a note that they had 93 players in camp. This is the first year they have a senior class, so they belong in 2A right now. And they're going to, they play APO in Middletown this year, so they're going into it headstrong. They're on their way to 3A, and they're going to check it out this year to see how they do. It might be a little rough this year, but they are going to be, you and I have talked about this off air for a long time. They're going to be a powerhouse eventually at the 3A level. There's just too many kids, too much talent in that area. Laurel, again, dominated everyone. There are only 2 losses, I think, in the 2 years were to 2A teams. And I think they beat 3 or 4 2A teams last year on their way to a 13-0 record. So, they deserve to move up. And of course, that division is now wide open. Yet St. Elizabeth's lose a lot. And with Laurel gone, it really opens things up for the Indian Rivers, the Wilmington Charters. So it's going to be an exciting year in 1A.
Yeah, so there's going to be a lot of parity there. There's going to be even more parity, I think, in 2A. We both agreed last year that was where the most parity was. I don't think anything has changed there. Laurel, like we mentioned, their big changes. Quarterback Caden Shockley, a 4-year starter, is no longer there. His sophomore brother Kobe's taken over. And then, of course, Odessa, like you just talked about, you mentioned Middletown and APO. They open in that Rumble on the River is what they're going to call it over there on the Appoquinimink River. And I'll be at that game. So, it's going to be a fun season, I think, for Odessa. They'll take some lumps probably, but it'll be interesting to see. They're going to go into that APO game with 1 game under their belt because they do play in week 0. APO does not. So that might be one advantage that they're looking at there.
And Dan Pritchard, I believe, created an or for the winner of that game.
That is correct.
For the Rumble in the River.
Yep,
okay.
That is correct.
So we have a new trophy game now.
Yeah. So that'll be, that's always exciting. The kids will get excited about that.
I like that stuff.
It'll be interesting to see as they do scheduling over the next few years, in the APO district, how those 3 teams, which could become 3, Middletown's already a powerhouse. APO winning the district last year, and, Odessa eventually is going to be good too. And it'll be interesting to see how they manipulate the schedule, whether that Rumble in the River becomes sort of like the Harvest Bowl used to be when it was, early in the year, opening game or whatever, or whether they change that around. Wait and see about that. The only other significant change I saw in 2A, Marty, was the district change and Red Lion moving from 3 to 1, which basically means they're not spending the entire fall traveling an hour and a half south to play other
Exactly.
teams.
I'm sure Ken Anderson loved that change for that reason.
Yeah, so that was a smart move.
It was
by the DIAA. So
I agree. Yeah, 2A is loaded. It's going to be a fun division to watch. There's so much parity there. You had Tattersall and Albero moving on from Friends and Archmere, so things again are going to be wide open there. Howard is loaded, I think. And they're ready to go. But there's a number of teams, nipping at their heels. One of them would have been St. Mark's, but we'll talk about them in a second.
Speaking of St. Mark's, the 3A group, they ruined what I thought was a perfect thing that they never did. Actually, St. George's did and Sally's did, which there was 11 teams and you played everybody in your division, and that was your 10-game schedule.
Yep.
Unfortunately, now there's 12 teams, so that would be impossible to do even if they wanted to do it, unless they started playing 11 games, which couldn't be out of the question, given that, if they're only going to take 6 people to the playoffs, but that's not going to happen. So there's no sense us talking about that. A district move, St. George's moved to District 2. Not a huge thing there, I don't think. I'm not sure. You could argue which district is tougher any given season of the two. The last couple years, District 2 might have been tougher with Smyrna, Sussex Central playing real well. St. George's in that district, making the playoff, and so I don't know. It's one of those things you can go back and forth about. Yes. But the big discussion was St. Mark's moving up to Class 3. Athletic director Matt Smith made it very clear they were fine doing that after the next 2-year cycle, but didn't think it was fair to move on up this cycle. The DIAA was adamant that they needed 12 teams in that class, and they were going to move somebody up. And Marty, if you didn't graduate from St. Mark's, you don't have a child in St. Mark's, or you don't work at St. Mark's, you think everybody else thinks it was the right move for St. Mark's to go up, like it or not. There was some talk about Howard and some talk about Archmere, and I think the DIAA made the right decision. And I don't want to get into the statistical stuff of why they moved up. We've talked about that. Others have talked about that. But when you look at it objectively, if they were going to move somebody out, St. Mark's was the one that was going.
And our new grain sponsors, one of them threatened to pull their sponsorship if I said one more time on air that St. Mark's is going to be fined at the 3A level. We have some good-natured back and forth with Jim O'Donohue of Grain, whose son plays for St. Mark's. But every report I've gotten the fall camp opening is that St. Mark's looks good, especially on the lines, which is where you need to be good to compete at the 3A level. Now, there's going to be some speed bumps, a lot of them. But if you look at their schedule, they've got a shot to make the playoffs. One of our we were talking the other day, one of our colleagues that also does podcasts, one of them predicted that St. Mark's would be in the 3A title game.
It might be a stretch.
Not sure that's going to happen.
The St. Mark's nation.
But it's a good thing. They're generating a lot of buzz. They had good numbers come out at camp, and I really do think they're going to be okay. Really looking forward to see how they fit in here. That their schedule is backloaded with, I believe, Sally's, Middletown is 2 of their last games, maybe their final 2 games. So they're really going to be up against it. It'd be cool to see Sally's and St. Mark's on the same field again. Mm-hmm. St. Mark's fans may not feel the same when that game is over, but you never know. I think line play is where it starts, and that's where St. Mark's looks strong. So again, all 3 of these levels this year, I really do think the DIAA did a really nice job moving the districts. And I believe it was Dave Collins from Hodgson, isn't he? Who's responsible for a lot of this stuff, putting the numbers and stuff together, and the realignment and things like that. And I think they did a great job of reorganizing things. So should be an exciting year.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see. St. Mark's, I think, could end up being not in the bottom of 3A, which is going to reinforce the decision to move them up because, again, somebody was going up. And I'm not sure if the other teams that would have been moved up would not have ended up at the bottom of 3A. And so, but we're going to find out on the field. That's the bottom line. And as we know in high school football, injuries happen, things happen, and, players leave teams for whatever reason. And so it's going to be a mix-up. That's what's exciting about it being week 0. We just have no way to know where it's going to go. All right. One of our returning sponsors is Mary Kate Johnston with ReMax Associates. She'll help you sell your home as if it was her own, and an award-winning realtor with 20 years of experience. She helped my wife and I sell our old house and purchase the one we've been in for the past 18 years, helped us every single step of the way, still gives us advice about things around the house. We've recommended her to dozens of friends. They've all been completely satisfied, whether it's a first home or an upsize, downsize for yourself, an aging parent, or one of your children. do yourself a favor and reach out to Mary Kate Johnston with ReMax Associates and let her make sure that you get the best value possible, whether you're buying or selling or both. Her website is marykatej.remax.com. That's marykatej.remax.com. And there you can also check out her multiple 5-star reviews on Zillow and read what others have said as well. That's Mary Kate Johnston with ReMax Associates. All right, Marta, the transfer portal here in the state of Delaware. Basketball, it's basically turned into that. At least it feels that way. This is not a basketball show, so we won't talk about that, but also some transfers around football. Some legitimate, some you could question it. And when I say question, here's the bottom line. To transfer in the state of Delaware, it has to be for non-athletic reasons. And of course, everybody can argue, I'm going to this school for non-athletic reasons, better atmosphere, better education, better whatever. Those kids all end up playing sports. And so we're not going to get into that, but we don't want people to think we're ignorant of the situation in the transfer portal. I'm going to start with, we got a list of about 6 kids, and we're not going to spend an hour on this. We're just going to talk real quick. Because they're significant athletes. There's a lot of athletes that we're not going to mention who transferred. I'm going to start with McKeevis Rogers, kid who spent 3 years at McCain, transferred to Newark. I met this kid, Marty. I wrote a story about Newark football for the Newark Post and talked to McKeevis Rogers. I tell you, I've been doing this for a long time, and he's one of the most polite, respectful young men I have ever met. I've met a lot of players, and you walk away from an interview with a lot of thoughts and very, I'm always rooting for kids.
Yep.
But there's a handful of kids who I've walked away and thought, you know what? I hope this kid just does incredible things on the football field and in life. And he's one of those kids. He went to McCain because his uncle played at McCain. And then with things changing at McCain, with a new coach, Matt Carey out to DMA, new coach comes in. And as he said, as McKeevis told me, my mother went to Newark High School, and there's a tradition there. And, you can argue that tradition was a long time ago, but there still is a tradition at Newark football.
Yep.
You go there and there's the Hive, and only a handful of kids, hundreds of kids have played in the Hive, and only a handful out of the millions of people that have played football in Delaware can say that they were one of them. And so he wanted to be one of those kids. So a significant transfer as coach, as his coach did, Jody Russell told me, he said, this kid fell in our lap. And it wasn't, there was nothing illegal about it, anything about it. This kid decided on his own. He wanted to transfer to Newark High School and play football while he was there. And it's a great thing for Newark High, and hopefully will be a great thing for McKeevis Rogers too, because it's his senior year and his final year of football.
And he is, there's not many players you can describe as electric in Delaware. Yep. He's one of them. Whether running the ball, he's got a cannon for an arm. He's going to bring a ton to that Newark offense. He's going to be able to open up a lot of avenues that they may not have had access to in the past in terms of different things they can do offensively. So I think, this is a huge pickup for Newark.
All right, another one, Brian. Aline from DMA to Sally's. Aline's going to spend his senior year at Sally's. Big pickup for the Sals.
It is. And Aline, it's kind of funny. He was a freshman at Sal's, transferred to DMA for 2 years, and has now transferred back to Salesianum. He's another kid who he's going to convert from quarterback to running backs. They've obviously got Ryan Storr, the last year's, he was kind of a freshman sensation there at Sally's, but he's going to be a running back along with Andrew Ransom in the backfield. And he's going to be one of those kind of players that you can use to do anything. If Gene Deladon chooses to do some trickery or whatever, you've got a kid that can throw the ball, a lot of experience back in the pocket. So this is a big pickup for the South. This is a case of the rich getting richer here. Because again, this kid, for Gene Deladon, this kid just fell in his lap. So BJ Lean's a great player and is going to be, it's all going to be on display this fall for Salesianum.
Another DMA transfer, Connor Sullivan, heading to St. Mark's.
This is a big one for St. Mark's because, as I said before, their line, they are loaded on the offense and defensive line. They performed really well last year. They had the unfortunate experience of, because they do throw the ball at times, of playing Friends in that mud pit last year in a playoff game, right, which was almost a custom built game for Tattersall, Robbie Tattersall, who just ran wild over them through the muck and the mud. But for St. Mark's, this is a huge pickup. DMA, it's a big loss on their line, especially with the schedule that they have, which is just a murderer's row of teams. But St. Mark's is going to be very strong on the lines, and that's where they're going to need to be to compete at the 3A level.
All right, let's go way downstate. Avion Matthews transferred from Seaford to Middletown.
Yeah, this is interesting. This Seaford, I'm not sure what happened down there, but they lost a ton of talent in different sports, basketball and football, most specifically. Avion Matthews is a terrific player. Was a wide receiver down at Seaford. They lost their starting quarterback as well, who went out of state to Maryland. Middletown, this is a huge pickup. Now, I will say he's listed on the roster. I did get 2 notes from people who said they haven't seen him playing in scrimmages, so I'm not sure what that is or what it has to do. I'm assuming because it's from Seaford to Middletown, I'm assuming it's a move, which of course you would not need a waiver for. So, but if he's in the lineup, he is a huge pickup for that Middletown team.
All right. Jacob Tiberi, William Penn to Sally's. Now it's Smyrna.
Yeah, so we've got our second 3-time transfer here. Jacob Tiberi, by all accounts, is a great kid. And he's a kid, it sounds like they're trying to break some habits where at William Penn, he was kind of running for his life when he was younger there. So he's got an instinct to run, which he's very good at. The reports out of Smyrna is that he and Jesse Dickinson are going to split time. But the Tiberi reports that I've seen, including from some coaches down there, are that he looks really good. He looks sharp. He's spending more time in the pocket, finding his receivers. And as we all know, Coach Marks and Coach Judy, they find a way to get the absolute most out of every athlete on the offensive side of the ball. So these kids are going to have a ton of weapons to go to. You know, it's the first time in, God, seems like 50 years that there's not a knight on the team. So there's going to be a lot of different things happening down there. But Jacob Tiberi is a nice pickup for them, a kid to add who's again, going to compete with another senior, Jesse Dickinson, for the starting job there.
And my sarcasm about 3 transfers in 4 years, we just want to make it clear when we talk about the transfer rules here in Delaware, we're not criticizing the athletes and the parents who take advantage of them because they are doing what any parent should do, which is try to find out the best situation for their child. And sometimes those transfers are very legitimate for a lot of reasons. And sometimes they are question marks about, you know, hey, are you really going there for the academics or are you going there for the athletics? And the bottom line is, if you're going there for the athletics and you're allowed to do it, go for it. And it goes back to my rule. Let's get out of the business of trying to determine where high schools should tell kids they have to play, or the DIAA. Wherever you start on August 15th or the day of football practice, and it doesn't matter what sport you're playing, that's the only high school you can play for 1 year. And then if you want to transfer next year, you don't need to tell us why. Transfer away.
And remember,
the coaches.
We had 2 board members, and I believe it was Papilli and Beretta, who basically said, we do have kids transferring for athletic reasons, and we counsel them to not talk about the athletics in there. And he said, look, we don't have a problem doing it, because if a kid's not going to play here, then let him go play somewhere else. You only have 4 years to play your high school ball. So it's such a quagmire there, but we know it happens. And it's until something happens in Delaware, I don't know. There's, you know, state associations in other states are very big. In Delaware, it's basically 2 people and a secretary. So there's not much they can do to monitor this stuff.
Yeah, Butch Simpson, told me that several years ago before he retired. He said, and John, until they hire somebody in each county or even each conference to regulate what's happening, why it's happening, this isn't going to go away. No, unless they come away with a flat rule. And, you know, as I said, you know, that's why I don't figure out, of course, it's my rule. So I think it should be right. You know, wherever you're at you're there for a year.
Well, you know what?
Go ahead.
Oh, go ahead. I looked up each of these different states, Pennsylvania, New Jersey. I saw Ohio. They all have an investigative unit as part of their athletic association. So they will dive into this stuff, but it's a number of people, or at least it's one person. I know in Ohio, it's one person whose job is only to investigate these kinds of issues. So Delaware, we just don't have that. And budget wise, based on what we hear with the board meetings, that new staff is not coming anytime soon.
No. And I've been public about it that I think, you know, Dave Baylor's going to do a great job, but I think if he does one thing in the several years that he's going to be here, it needs to figure out this transfer thing for 2 reasons. One, so it becomes very black and white as to whether you can transfer or not and what the rules are. Because I said, you know, it tells you a lot when they come out of these personnel portions of or whatever they call it, business of the DIAA meetings, and you find out a kid was approved to transfer in a vote of 5-4 or something like that by one. It shouldn't be that way. It should be one way or the other. And, you know, it should get to a point where, you know, we have a rule and you can't transfer except for these 2 reasons. And so you either prove those 2 reasons or, you know, whatever. And so, it's a transfer rule. A transfer should be unanimous is how it should work, but it doesn't work that way. And the amount of time it takes up on these board meetings is going to impact the board in the future, because there's going to be good people who are not going to come onto this board because they're not going to sit through a day-long meeting in the middle of the week.
Yep.
That spends more than half the meeting talking about these transfers. All right, enough of that. New rules on the gridiron in football. There's always a lot of new rules from the NFHS. Most of them deal with stuff you don't care about, you won't know about, you won't see the changes, logos, that type of stuff, referee positioning, that kind of things. But there are two pretty significant rules, one from the NFHS, one here in Delaware, that are going to impact the game. And let's start with the NFHS one. There is, if there's a penalty in the backfield now, and I think this is whether it's on offense or defense, I'm pretty sure that's the rule. It goes back to the original line of scrimmage and it's marked off.
Yes.
So a quick example, in the past, if a halfback held a lineman 7 yards behind the line of scrimmage, it was a 10-yard penalty from the point of contact, the point where the hold took place. So in my example, it now becomes basically a 17-yard penalty. This is going to keep it at a 10-yard penalty. So if it's 1st and 10 on the 20, there's a hold on the 13-yard line. It will now be 2nd and 20 on the 10-yard line.
Yes.
And you can do that real quick in your head. It does make sense. And so I like it for two reasons, because they're getting the penalty yardage is the true yardage for the penalty. It's not where the penalty takes place.
Yes.
The most important reason why I like it is because in the past, the referee had to focus on where he's throwing his flag and try to get it to where the actual foul took place, because then that's where the penalty was going to be marked off on, which is almost impossible to get it exact because of most of these referees have to throw the flag at least 5 to 10 yards to get it to the spot.
And how many conferences did we see where they looked to decide where was this penalty happening? I'm sure the referees were like, hallelujah at this one. This is great.
And the ref can also watch the play through. He's not looking at about where the flag's going. He's making sure that person who did the hold or didn't or got held isn't, making a cheap shot at the guy for doing it or whatever. So I like that for two reasons. Your thoughts? You like the rule, don't like it?
I do. And I'll just add real quick. The only other thing I'd like to see is I hate that the referees are forced to throw the flag at the play. Mm-hmm. It was, I don't know if you remember years ago, the Orlando Brown and Cleveland, where the referee hit him in the eye with the flag.
Right.
But it always cracks me up that the flags come flying in at the players. And I'm like, every other sport, just throw it up in the air. We know that you can tell us what happened.
But now that should happen, right? Now that should
exactly.
happen. There's no reason not to throw it straight up in the air.
No. And I love this rule because it does take a lot of off the mind of the officials, where they don't have to pay such close attention to what happens at what yard line. They see the foul, they call it, they mark it off from the line of scrimmage, done, and the game moves on.
All right, so that's a new rule you'll see. And again, if anybody listening who doesn't listen to the pod, who's next to you, you'll be able to tell them that's why they're doing it now. So that's right. That's our gift to you for week 1 or week 0. All right, the other rule is local, and that's a change in the playoff situation in all 3 classes. Basically, the district winners are in. Everybody else, it's back to the indexing system that it used to be. So it used to be the Henlopen Conference got an auto bid, and the Blue Hen Conference got an auto bid, and everybody else was indexed in, where your strength of schedule benefits you significantly. And that's what they have gone back to. So now we're going to see more parity in terms of, if you play in the toughest district in the state of Delaware in class 2A, you still got a shot to get in if you're in 5th place, because we saw a few situations over the past 2 years where we felt a team got in 4th place in one district, and the 5th place team in the other district was a much better football team.
Yeah, Mount Pleasant last year, Randy Holmes last season, if this had been in place and they still had the 12 playoff structure, they would have made the playoffs last year. But because of the way it was set up, the top 4 in each district. Yeah, this is plain and simple. This is the top, the district winner in every class advances to the playoffs, and every other team, and all seeding is done by the point system. So if you win your district, you could still end up as the 4th or 5th seed. Most likely that wouldn't happen, but and we'll call this the APO rule, John, because when they decided to change this, the discussion at the DIA board meeting centered on APO and the fact that even though they won District 1, which is a extremely difficult district, they would have been about the 5th or 6th seed based on points. And I guess some of the powers that be, namely the schools that be, didn't like the fact that APO got a number 1 seed or a top seed because of that. So they changed this rule. bottom line is this should have happened in the first place.
Right.
You and I have said, the strength of these districts, it's so tough. And the one thing I will miss, and it makes it much easier for guys like us at the end of the year, it would come down to a district game. I think we had Red Lion and Woodbridge were battling for a
Right.
playoff spot last year, and we knew whoever won that game was in. It's going to be a little more difficult now because of the point system. And again, we have the out-of-state schools, which again, thankfully, they don't go by the population of the schools anymore. So this is a good change, all in all. We're going to have, I believe it's 8 teams in each of the 3 districts. It's all standard now. We'll make the playoffs. So it's good for football. 24 is better. I think we had 36 playoff teams last year. So we're back down to a reasonable number, 24, which is still more than half of the playing teams, 46 that are going to get into the playoffs. But I like this system much better.
All right, so that's it's a good change, 2 good changes that you're going to see, and you'll notice for that. All right, another one of our new sponsors this year is Diamond Hill Incorporated. They're celebrating their 20-year anniversary. For 20 years, they've been serving all of Delaware and the surrounding areas in all things construction, from commercial concrete and site development to residential projects. They've got you covered. Email info@diamondhillinc.com for more information. That's info@diamondhillinc.com. Diamond Hill would like to wish all of Delaware's high school athletes good luck this year, and we'd like to thank them for being a sponsor of the podcast. All right, time to talk about week 0. So we've caught up on all the other changes, the podcast changes and football, that type of thing.
Yep.
A new thing this year, Marty, the Mid-Atlantic Pigskin Classic is going to be at Avion Stadium. 2 games Thursday, 3 games Friday, and 3 Saturday. It's going to feature some Delaware versus Delaware teams, some New Jersey versus New Jersey teams, some PA versus PA teams. I think there's a PA versus New Jersey game. And I know there's a Delaware versus, I think it's a PA game as well. And so we're not going to bother talking about the Camden-Salem game, which is sort of interesting to me because I grew up in South Jersey, but I know it's not interesting to those of you listening to the podcast. So let's talk about the Delaware games. We're going to start with the kickoff of the Mid-Atlantic Pigskin Classic Thursday at 3:30. It's going to be Howard versus Hodson. And that's a great game, no matter where you're from here in the state of Delaware.
Yeah, when I saw that this was going to lead off, and Dave Collins tweeted out that, what a great start to the season to start off with a rivalry game. This is one of those, forget the classes, Howard's 2A, Hodson's 3A. These are 2 rivals in a game where, frankly, Howard, if we were in Las Vegas, Howard would be the favorite to win this game. The last 2 years, they have blown out Hodson, 36-12 and 44-18. They're coming off an 8-1 regular season. The Wildcats are. This is Dave Collins' first game as head coach at Hodson, though he's been a long-time assistant, and he's the athletic director there. Dan Ritter has a starting quarterback, RJ Matthews, he's one of those, another electric kids. They have first team all 3A wide receiver Jamal Johnson. Now, Hodson, it's interesting. Dave Collins is going to get back his junior quarterback, Xavier Brown, who missed more than half the season last year with an injury. And we saw them a number of times. And the quarterback was a tough spot for them. They had a kid, I believe it was an all-district or all-state wide receiver who agreed to take over at quarterback. And he did a really nice job, but it wasn't his natural position. With Xavier Brown back, they're going to be at full strength at that position. All reports are, and Dave was one of them who sent us something, the kid's having a great camp. On defense, Makai Beach is back to lead the way defensively. Wide receiver Brasheem Davis is going to be a popular target for Brown. This is going to be a great game. I really think that Hodson, one of the things that Dave Collins told us was that the attitude of the kids just seemed to be, again, it has nothing to do with Frank Moffitt or anything like that. It's sometimes a new voice comes in and there's a different energy.
Right.
And it seems like they're feeding off of that right now. And so I think this has the potential to be a really good game, especially if Brown is at full health for this game, because Howard is going to be a beast at the 2A level this year.
And nobody is rooting for Howard more than anybody who goes to St. Mark's or is a St. Mark's alum.
That's right.
So if Howard wins, we will have Jim O'Donohue on the podcast to talk about why Howard should have been moved up and St. Mark's should.
That's right.
So, hopefully it's a great way to start the Delaware season, Howard versus Hodson. Again, that's 3:30 at Apicinio Stadium. And I believe those games are being broadcast by Flow Sports. So there's a
They are.
subscription involved in that, and that's all I can tell you about that. So if you don't want to go up to the game, that would be an option to see all of these games. All right, another Delaware versus Delaware game is going to be on Thursday at 7:00, and that's going to be Sally's and DMA. You have 2 first-year head coaches, at least at their school, and 2 sophomore quarterbacks who got significant time, if not all the time, at their on their team last year.
Yeah, this is interesting because it's 2 teams that are in the midst of changing their identities for completely different reasons. We all know what happened at DMA. And of course, at Sally's, DiNardo was a legend. Gene's replacing him. There's going to be a new offense. There's going to be more passing than there had been in the past. There might be a lot more movement in the backfield, things that Sally's didn't used to do. But on the field, this is interesting for Gene. I remember in the spring we talked about this, and I said this was a tough game for Gene Deladon, because if people are expecting him to blow DMA out, if they don't blow him out, they're, oh my God, what's happening here? And God forbid they lose the game. They'll be calling for Gene's head the next day. Joking, I say that jokingly, but only half so.
Right.
DMA, Matt Carey, brings a completely different attitude in there. He comes from McCain. They did lose a couple pieces with BJ Lean and Connor Sullivan, but and of course they're playing against BJ Lean now. Right. But Ahmad Foster, a defensive tackle for Sally's, is going to be a monster on that side of the ball. He is going to be coached by former NFLer Paul Warlow, the Concord and then University of Delaware grad, who led the Falcons, I believe, for 3 years in tackles. 6-year NFL career, did a really nice job, and Gene's now got him on his side. For DMA, Carey inherits a young team, but a team with a lot of experience, because they had a lot of young guys see action last year. All 2A offensive tackle, Kalen Denegris, is probably one of the best offensive linemen in the state, regardless of level. Odell Teal, the court last year, he kind of played a hybrid position. This year, it sounds like he's going to be strictly a quarterback. He's a great athlete. He still already has some offers from some big time schools, and he should help DMA generate a more consistent offense, something they really struggled with last season. So this should probably be a win for Sally's, but it's a good measuring stick for the DMA kids to see where they are to start the season. And for Gene Deladon, he gets a chance to go out there and show off that new offense and see what he's got.
All right, so that's a Thursday game. Friday at 7:30, Smyrna takes on Manheim Central, so an out-of-state game for the Eagles. All the rest of the games are teams from Pennsylvania and New Jersey playing against each other, and so not going to bother going through all that. Before we talk about the rest of week 0, I want to talk to you about a book I got the other day, Marty. It's called Win the Day Planner: Your Key to Building Winning Habits for a Lifetime. And it so happens to be written by Dan Rigby, who led both Cesar, Rodney, and Milford High School to multiple championship appearances and a combined 3 state titles as the head wrestling coach. He's got years of experience working with athletes of all ages and abilities. And the Win the Day Planner acts as a reliable tool to guide you toward the formation of winning habits. Moreover, the act of honest self-reflection, which is facilitated by this planner, aids in clarifying your goals and plans. It's perfect for your 18-week sports season or the newly launched 42-week one, which is perfect for the entire academic school year. And let's face it, sports or not, this planner can be used for any life season you're navigating through, whether it's job-related, an organization you're part of, or what have it, and whether you're a kid or an adult. The Win the Day Planner doesn't just help you become a better athlete or student, but a better teammate, friend, and most importantly, a better person. I ordered this for my son and can tell you from firsthand experience, this planner is one of the best and most useful tools for athletes I've ever seen. Get your print or digital copy today at winthedayplanner.com. Again, that's winthedayplanner.com. All right, let's go on to week 0, the games that are happening that are not part of that opening kickoff classic start. We're going to start with 2 and then get into a little bit more detail with the others. Marty, yep. FSMA, First State Military Academy at AI DuPont. The biggest news about this game is that AI DuPont is back and has a team this year.
That's
at
right.
least as of right now.
Yes. You know what? This is funny because Marcus Heyman has been waiting 2 years to coach this team because they did not have a season last year. I call this the one small step bowl because for AI, I think a victory comes by just getting on the field.
Yeah, absolutely.
And based on the conversation I had with a school official there, their numbers are coming up steadily. They were expecting some more 9th graders to come in once school started. So hopefully AI is going to be in it for the long haul this season. Coach Jeff Braxton for FSMA, he comes in with more than 30 experience, most of it at the college level, some of it at Dell State. They have a first team all district wide receiver, Joshua Devonish, second team all district player, Raheem Tamani, a running back. There's nothing there that to build on, I should say, that, they have done, there's no history. They've done nothing. I think Coach Braxton is the right guy who's going to get this program going a little bit. One of these teams is going to come out of this with a monster amount of confidence. It may be short-lived based on the schedule, but for a first game, this is a great first game for both of these teams.
And winnable by both teams. That's the most exciting thing about that. And you may have said that. I apologize if you did. And so that's that's just going to be a neat thing about this. The other game is Dickinson at Delmar. Dickinson, of course, struggled last year. That's a long drive down to Delmar. I've made it a couple times in the past couple of years with my job, but they'll get down there and try to come away with a win.
They will. This is Dubin Ward's first game as the head coach there. They have all-state defenders, Fayed Blair and Kanye Anderson. They have two other all-district players, Stephen DeShields and Naeem Benson, their defensive backs. For Delmar, they've been a playoff team both years of the realignment phase. Dave Hearn always puts a good team on the field. They always have a contender. This year, all-district performers Scott Messick and Brandon Turner return to lead the offense. They have a great return man in Takai Hughie to lead the defense and the special teams. So this is a game, again, this is probably going to be a long bus ride for Dickinson. It's a great start for Dave Hearn at Delmar. They lost a lot of talent, but they've still got some good guys coming back. And I think they're going to be a contender at the 2A level. Again, that's going to be a wide open situation down there. But for Dickinson and Dubin Ward, this is a tough first trip for the season, but I'm curious to see what he's able to do with the talent he has. And his numbers are pretty good. The numbers he reported to us in camp were up around the 30 level, which for Dickinson is not bad at all. So hopefully a successful season there for Dickinson.
And, we talk about a long drive, but you ask anybody, one of the top 5 places to watch a game is at Delmar High School on a Friday night. Marty, I've decided when my kids get out of college, before your grandchildren get into high school, or my kids get out of high school before yours get into high school, when you have things to do on Friday night, you and I are going to go on a stadium tour on Fridays and Saturdays and hit all these stadiums that we keep telling people they're great places to see.
Oh my God, yeah.
And
that's
be
a
able
great
to say
idea. I love
be
that.
able to say it and just go and sit on a Friday night and watch these games. So I hope Dickinson has a decent following down there. You got to assume the parents are going to go, but folks on a Friday night, head down there, see football in a great place.
That's right.
And
opening weekend.
Be a good time. Yep. All right. So the other I was just looking at the other games, Marty. There's 6 more games we're going to talk about. Every one of them is going to be a good game for some good reasons.
I agree, 100%.
That's what's neat about it. Let's start with Cesar Rodney at William Penn. It's on 4:00 on Thursday. And again, a lot of these games are happening Thursday and Friday to try to get them done before the weekend, the Labor Day weekend. And so you've got a new coach, Sean Strickland, veteran coach, Matt Sabol, 2 teams that have struggled in this realignment. Neither one, I don't believe, has made I know Cesar Rodney has not made the playoffs. I don't believe William Penn. I know they didn't last year. I don't think they did the first year. And so, it's going to be a game that one of these teams has to win, and it's going to be a huge win for whichever team does to start off the season.
It will. This was, and it's a revenge game for William Penn because CR was on a 20-game losing streak when they beat William Penn at the end of last season, 26-6. So William Penn is going to want to get back there. William Penn was 2-8 last year. Cesar Rodney scored 8 or fewer points 8 times. They could generate no offense at all until they got William Penn towards the end of the season. Again, Sean Strickland comes back as head coach. There's been a couple articles about him down there. The numbers they have are very good. He seems to be very excited about the direction this team is going. And again, it's Dan Candeloro leaves, and it's sometimes, again, a different voice. And Sean Strickland, being a graduate of Cesar Rodney, knows the history there. So he's very excited to kind of reignite the embers of what used to be there. Sean Strickland, all district performers come back for CR, Tanner Smith and Parker Smith. I'm not sure if they're related, but they both return. And for William Penn, they've got Ryan White Taylor and Mark Moore, a wide receiver and quarterback. Mark Moore did a nice job last season. But to your point, this will be a great game to see who's able in 3A to get a great start. Again, this kind of reminds me of the FSMA AI game for a different reason. That 2 teams coming off very tough seasons. One of them is going to leave with a ton of momentum.
Also leave with the possibility that they could be 3-0, because if William Penn wins, they follow that up with Penn Wood, who they beat pretty easily last year, and a Class 2 team in Milford. So they could be legitimately 3-0. Cesar, Rodney, if they win, their next 2 games are against Class 2 opponents. Now,
Yep.
2 tough Class 2 opponents in Lake Forest and Laurel. But hey, it's still a shot that you could go at least 2-1, maybe 3-0 as well. So good. It's a good win for both those teams to launch into the next couple games after that. All right, Red Lions going to head down to Cape Henlopen at 7:00 on Thursday. Great move making that a Thursday game. You'd hate to travel down to the beach area for a Friday night game on Labor Day weekend. So a good move by them doing that on Thursday. I think it's a bigger game for Cape to prove that last year was legitimate when they had a pretty good season compared to the previous years in Mike Frederick's first year. For Red Lion, a win is a huge upset. And then they have games against Glasgow, Lake Forest, and then St. Mark's. So they have games against the Class 1A, 2A, and 3A team after this one. So a big game for both teams.
It is. I'll call this the Benny Mitchell Classic because Benny always complains that during the summer, us Northerners invade his territory down there. So he always says Labor Day is the time when I get to say goodbye to all you Northerners. So we get closer and closer to that. For Red Lion, Evan Buttinger, it looks like a future star. He did a great job last year. They've got a great weapon in the kicking game. Sam Crossan is one of the best returning kickers in the state. They won for their first playoff game last year. Coach Ken Anderson singled out a freshman, Makai Corbin, as someone who's had an absolutely terrific camp. He's got them on an upward trajectory. Last year, boy, when they needed to get in the playoffs they needed to beat Woodbridge. I think they put close to 60 points on the board, or maybe over 60 points. So they put a lot of points on the board at the end of the game. Cape got off to a 4-2 start under Dave Frederick. I'm
Mike Frederick.
Myself. Mike Frederick. I'm sorry. Dave Frederick's the writer down there. Yeah.
Dave's nephew.
That's right. Mike Frederick, the former NFLer, got them off to a 4-2 start. They finished with a 5-game losing streak, including their playoff game. 2 of their 4 wins were over Class 2, but on the field, and I think we saw this in the Sally's game, it looked like a different team, Cape Henlopen team. It was making it the turn. They've got a strong line returning. They also have Marquis James, tight end. Bren Scott, Lexton Westcott is one of the fastest, best-handed receivers in the state. They also return a great kicker in all-district kicker Wilson Ingursky. So, again, a great game. Cape Henlopen, if you're Red Lion, you may or may not win this game, but it's a great measuring stick to see where you are to start the season against a team at the 3A level. For Cape Henlopen and Mike Frederick, it's a great chance to get off to a good start. As you said, it could really propel them. They rode the 4-2 start to a playoff berth last year. I fully expect Cape to be a playoff team this year as well.
So it should be a good one. And, Red Lion will be the first to tell you they don't want to go down and lose a close game and call it a win, and they won't. No. But like you said, it could be the biggest win of the season for them if they go down there and win that first game. All right, the Odessa and Lake Forest. Odessa's first appearance as a Class 2A team. Lake Forest, of course, has been a 2A team for the past 2 years. 2 legitimate D2 teams, Marty. The game's down at Lake Forest. I think this is a toss-up. I really do.
I do too. And again, Odessa, Dan Pritchard told us they had 93 players in camp. So there's a lot of participation down there. They went 3-8 in their first season in 2021, but made the playoffs because of the district situation. That improved to 5-5 last year. Of the 93 players, I love this. 11 of them have been there since day one, the first day of camp that Odessa football had. And Dan Pritchard was very excited about those 11 kids. He said the offensive line looks great, which is really good news for second-year starter J.C. Alley, who's going to have be on his game for Odessa to have a good season. They got running back Azir Bellamy and offensive lineman Phil Kamara. They looked really good at times last year. I think it's going to be tough sledding. This is one of those, maybe they bit off more than they could chew because they start the season with Middletown and APO, I believe, early in the season, I should say. Lake Forest is not a team to be taken lightly. No. Fred Johnson always has a good team down there. They return roughly half of their starters. Jonathan Tyndall is making his 24th straight start when he enters this game. He's a proven commodity. Trevon Hodnett, is on record saying he wants to set the Lake tackle record. So you got a defensive guy there ready to get at it. Their star running back is junior Aiden Young. He is still waiting for medical clearance based on the information we got from Fred Johnson. If he's able to go, it makes him that much stronger. And they have an all-district return man in Jamie or Snell. So Fred Johnson's got a number of weapons there. Odessa is going to be fired up to play this game, their first game as a 2A team. So I agree. This is a toss-up. I wouldn't be surprised to see this game go either way.
A win for Odessa launches them into the Rumble on the River at 1-0. And so either way, it gives them the advantage that they'll have a real game under their belt, whereas it'll be Appoquinimic's first game at that Rumble at the River. So looking ahead to that. All right, Mount Pleasant and Milford, 2 first-year head coaches at their schools. Jeff Allen at Mount Pleasant, the longtime assistant there, and Jed Bell, who was a head coach at Woodbridge for a few years before he went to DIAA, now the athletic director and head coach at Milford. This is going to be another great Class 2 battle, and we said Class 2 is going to have more parity than anybody, so every win is a big win from week one.
These two teams met in the season finales of each of the last 2 seasons. 28-14 and 41-7 were the scores. I believe it was Mount beating Milford in those games. I actually forgot to write down who won the games, but I think it was Mount Pleasant winning those games. Jeff Allen, I think, is going to do a great job there. He has experience in the position as far as being at Mount Pleasant. They went 9-9 the last 2 seasons. And as I said, had a different system been in place last year, they may have made the playoffs in Randy Holmes' last season. They have kids with winning experience. So I think there's definitely going to be an uptick at Mount Pleasant. For Jed Bell, his return to Milford, his alma mater. He's now the AD, he's the head coach. I didn't know Jed Bell was so young. He's only 33 years old. God, it made me feel old when I saw an article about him. And the reason is, you look at his resume, he spent 10 years at Woodbridge, 2 as the head coach. He was part of 2 state championships as the defensive coordinator there. Now, Milford hasn't had a winning season since 2017 when they finished runner-up to Delmar in the state. But Jed's going to turn that around. He has an experience as a winning coach. We both got to know Jed kind of through the Diaz stuff and which was a big loss for the DIAA when he left there, but a great pickup for Milford. All-district linebacker Charles Shorts returns to lead the defense. They're going to be a defensive identity team because of Jed. And again, a great game. If you're a fan of either one of these teams or 2A in general, this is just a great game to start the season to see where 2 new head coaches, where their teams stack up.
All right, another good game. Woodbridge at Seaford. I look at this, Marty, as almost a must-win for Woodbridge after last year's 2-8 season. They're playing down a class in Class 1A. Seaford's had 2 straight playoff appearances, so they're no slouch. But I just think this is I just think the win would be so much more impactful in this program than a loss would be. And Marvin Dooley's a veteran coach, and nobody knows that more than him.
And there was a lot of young kids on that team last year that got great experience during that 2-8 season. Go back to what we were talking about when we talked about Avion Matthews earlier. Seaford was gutted in the offseason. Again, I'm not sure. They lost their head coach. Mark Quillen, of course, left to become the take an AD position. And new head coach Austin Perry inherits a team that lost a lot of key pieces. But as you said, now, and remember real quick, going back to last year, they gave St. Elizabeth's all they could handle in the semifinals. They averaged 34 points per game during the season. Now, again, the starting quarterback is gone. Avion Matthews is gone. They lost a number of other players. They still have one huge weapon, and he was incredible in that game against St. Elizabeth's, and that's running back Jazante Levan. Ran for 1,500 plus yards, close to 20 touchdowns. So the cupboard is not bare. So it's going to be interesting to see where Perry comes out there. For Woodbridge, that season was dismal. They gave up 41 or more points in 7 games, which if you know Marvin Dooley as a head coach, he's a defensive-minded guy. That just does not happen. That's not going to happen 2 years in a row. They had a 3-game stretch where they surrendered 171 points. So that's going to turn around. They have all-district running back Tracy Johnson. They have a number of, again, a lot of young kids that gained a lot of experience last year. So I expect Woodbridge to make a mark back. I agree with you. I almost think that because of the circumstances, this really is a must-win game for Woodbridge.
All right. The next game's not a must-win for one of the teams. Would be a huge disappointment for another team, and that's Class 2 Laurel, new Class 2 Laurel, taking on Class 3. And traditional powerhouse in Class 3. Again, use that word, in air quotes kind of thing, because a lot of powerhouses over the years in Class 3, but Sussex Central is one of them. This might be the first matchup between these two teams, Marty. I look back on websites for sports as long as it goes back, and those two teams never played each other, which you wouldn't expect them to, because again, Laurel was basically a low Division I team or a mid Division I team back in the days when there were two divisions, and Sussex Central was always in the playoffs as a division or a Division I team. Sussex Central was, I should say, in the old days. Laurel, a Division II team that often didn't make the playoffs back then. And so it would never make sense for those two teams to play each other just from a size standpoint. And so this might be the first time they've ever played each other. So hats off to Laurel putting this game on their schedule, because it's a big game right off the bat. But Marty, I stood next to that Laurel team on the sideline of the state championship last year. Those guys are huge.
Yes.
They're huge.
So, they always say they grow them big down south in Delaware.
And of course, Sussex Central from the same crop. They're getting kids from the same crop. So
that's why this could, when I first saw the schedule, this was one of the games that kind of jumped out at me as a really intriguing game to open the season. Laurel, of course, just dominated the 1A level. And it's funny because there's an interview on one of the websites, one of the local news stations, did an interview with some of the Laurel players, and they asked him, well, what do you think about, 2A? It's going to be a tougher level. And he said, well, we dominated 1A. We'll just come up and show people that we can dominate 2A. Well, that's yet to be seen, but a good start to that would be to take down or at least stay competitive with a really good Sussex Central team. Laurel, again, 2 state championships, a 24-2 record, both losses to 2A teams. As you mentioned earlier, Shockley is going to be under center again for Laurel, only this time it will be younger brother Kobe, a lefty. I saw some video of him with his Steve Young-like moves, always a lefty. And it's so different getting used to a lefty quarterback for receivers. That's an underrated part of things, the ball coming out of there differently. But they have first team all 3A linebacker Royce Scotton is going to anchor the defense. Kobe Shockley, though he's suited up for the varsity games last year, he started every JV game, so he's a kid with a lot of experience, and of course he got to learn from his brother. Sussex Central 8-3 last season. Boy, they beat Sally's, Dover, and St. George's. Sussex Central hasn't missed the playoffs since 2015. Now, they do have to replace 2 big running backs, Andrew Long and Patrick Henry, but John Wells seems to put out a contender every single year. Kevon Moore-Brittle is one of the better defenders in the state. Tight end Kyle Custis is a phenomenal athlete, and he's one of a leader of that team. The Golden Knights also have a major returning weapon, and you and I got on this kick last year about kickers, but Ibrahim Leva Fajako, who again still has one of the best names in the state. He was an all 3A kicker, and what we learned with James Collins and Sally's last year is a kicker can make such a huge difference at that level. So I'm excited to see what happens with this game. Laurel is big, and they've got experience. Now, Kobe Shockley is going up against a defense that does not allow a lot. So it's a big start for him in his first career start at the varsity level. But this is an exciting game.
Going to be one of those games, Marty, that you almost wish didn't happen in week 1 because of the Kobe situation. You'd
love to see an experienced kid. I agree.
Right. Play in week 5. Now, again, Sussex Central is going to be 5 games better in week 5 too. But at least your starting quarterback, starting for the first time ever, will have 5 games under the belt if you're Laurel. But that's not the way it is, so we'll see what happens. All right, before we move on, Marty and I want to talk about something we both love to do, which is eating out. One of our new sponsors this year is the Marticelli Restaurant Group. They own the Chesapeake Inn, Klondike Kate's, and La Casa Pasta, and they've given us a gift card for us to give to you, our loyal listeners, each week. And Marty, that's going to happen because we have a trivia that you have pulled from archives from somewhere, and I started reading it. And it's a tricky one, and it's going to be.
We'll see if people are able to get these, or if I need to make things easier a bit. But I you know how I am with the News Journal archives. I love to go digging for stuff. All right, so we've got 14 new head coaches this year, the most there's ever been in Delaware. So in keeping with that number, we're going to go back to opening weekend 14 years ago, specifically September 11th, 2009. God, back when the season, that seems so late now. We're in like week 5 at that point now. That Friday night, September 11th, 2009, Middletown beat crosstown rival APO 35-14. No surprise back then. One player that night really stood out, though, for Middletown. Scored 23 of the Cavaliers' 35 points. He scored on offense defense, and special teams, including going 5 for 5 on extra point kicks. So for a chance at a Marticelli Group gift card to any one of their 3 locations, name the player. Now, here are the rules for the contest. Our pod email account is delhsfootball@gmail.com. That's delhsfootball@gmail.com. Send your answer to that email. Don't put it on social media. As John pointed out last night, the first time somebody puts an answer on there, everyone will have the answer. So send it to our email account. Your answer has to be received by Wednesday at 8 p.m. If there's more than one correct answer received, John and I will put the names into a hat. We'll pull one out and we'll announce the winner next week, and they will get the gift card. So we think this kind of fun little way of using, I'm kind of going to go on a theme of doing something different each week based on something that's happening that week, or a player who may have had a great week the week before. And we'll have a little fun with it and see how we go.
All right. You can enjoy signature crab cakes and other fresh seafood at the Chesapeake Inn, homemade pastas and seafood specialties at La Casa Pasta, or Klondike Kate's famous cheesesteak, egg rolls, and nachos. So 3 great restaurants, all known for their delectable dishes, cozy ambiance, and exceptional service. We can't thank the Marticelli Group enough for supporting our podcast and, in turn, supporting high school football here in Delaware. So, Marty, give that email address one more time. We're also going to post this segment on YouTube and as a podcast, so that you can listen to just this segment again if you missed the trivia question. And we'll put this. Let's say we're going to put the question on our Facebook page, Marty, and that way people can read it again, because it was it was a longer one. So that'll be posted. But again, as Marty said, don't post your answer on social media, because then you're going to be one of about 500 people in the hat pulling it out. So keep the answer to yourself. Send it to our email address. Marty, what's that email address?
And the email is delhsfootball@gmail.com. That's delhsfootball@gmail.com.
All righty. So thanks again to the Marticelli Restaurant Group for sponsoring our trivia question of the week. All right, let's talk about new coaches, Marty. 14 of them, I think, is the number.
14,
is that right?
Yep.
14, like 30% or something like that, some high percentage.
It's incredible. It's like 31% of the coaches.
Yeah, and it has to be the most turnover ever. And,
absolutely.
Turnover for a lot of different reasons. Some coaches moving from one place to another, some coaches retiring, some coaches being told they're not coming back, that type of thing. We thought it'd be cool to say who has the toughest job and who has the easiest job of the new coaches. Marty, I'll let you start with who you think has the toughest job this year.
I'm going to go with 2 guys, and one of them is kind of an easy one, and that's Gene Deladon at Sally's. He's replacing a legend in Bill DiNardo, and people are going to expect big things from Gene. Frankly, I think at some point, it may not be this season, but he is going to deliver. It's going to take a little while to get used to the system. I think the next one is, and this is kind of off the beaten path a little bit, I think Jeff Allen at Mount Pleasant has a tough job, and here's why. Randy Holmes, I went back through the archives. Boy, he's been like 4-6, 5-5, 6-4, always around that area. They've always been a competitive team. Jeff's got to at least maintain that, if not improve upon it. I personally think he's going to improve upon it, but I think it's an underrated thing that fans of Mount Pleasant, are going to look and say, hey, with Randy Holmes, we were always in the mix, right around the middle of the area in Division II. Jeff Allen's going to have a time keeping that, maintaining it. I do think he'll improve on it, but I think there's a little pressure there.
Yeah, that's a good call. It's easy to say you have an easy job if you take over a 2-10 team.
Yep. And
it's an easy job if you walk into the Sally's job. But it's that one that's in the middle there that, fans don't want to see it go backwards.
Yep.
And sometimes it's harder to make it at least even stay on the steady pace that, as you said, Randy Holmes did over his 20-year career. I also had Gene Deladon down, Marty, as the toughest job. And that is because he's replacing a legend. And let's face it, a legend who did not go out on his own terms. And so a little bit more is expected. And so I think Gene's going to do the job. I think he's going to get it done. But Sally's is a place where if you don't win a state championship, it's a disappointing season. If you don't make the playoffs, it's a disastrous season. And so that's why I think that Gene Deladon has the toughest job of the 14 new head coaches. I think he'll do the job. I think if even for some reason they don't make the playoffs this year, which is possible. 3A is a tough division. The upper echelon of the 3A is a tough class, and all it takes is one upset loss, and all of a sudden you're not making the playoffs. And so that's going to be a tough job for Gene Deladon. Great guy. I think he'll attract players there that it maybe
Yes.
wouldn't have been going there otherwise, just for the reason that I think it was at a point where even if Bill DiNardo didn't leave this year, you would think, am I going to send my kid there as a freshman? Is Bill DiNardo still going to be there after the 4 years when he gets out? Similar to college situations once coaches get to the point where they've been there for 30 plus years. So that's my toughest coach job is the Sally's job for Gene Deladon. All right, the easiest job, Marty, I'll go first. Matt Carey at DMA. All he has to do is get through the season without any issues off the field or on the field, and it's a successful season. Now, I know the people who play for DMA, go to DMA, coach at DMA, are probably laughing at me and in jest that they want to have a winning season. They want to make the playoffs. Sure, they do. But I can tell you what, the people at DMA, the higher ups, they want a season where there's no issues on the field, off the field, or anywhere else, because they've had a couple tough years for one reason or another, and we're not going to get into all that. We think Matt Carey, or I think Matt Carey, I'm not going to speak for you, was a great hire by Jeremy John.
I agree.
He knows Delaware football. He knows Delaware football players. He's not trying to bring in players from Philadelphia and beyond. He's playing with the kids who want to get a education at Delaware Military Academy. And I think bringing in somebody like Matt Carey is going to help keep the DMA football program at the level it's at and get it even better.
Yep.
Unfortunately, with the guy who was there before, it was going in the wrong direction. And I think I say that it's not a subjective opinion. Let me put it that way. There's very few people that would disagree with that. Your thoughts?
And,
Marty,
and I love the Matt Carey hire. I think for the exact same reason you said. And I'm glad you pointed out that it's because, of different circumstances, which we pointed out at the beginning of the show, because on the football field, it will be anything but easy for him because their schedule, I got to say their schedule is probably the toughest in the state, but I agree with you 100% that they're looking to do things a different way now. And that's the key. For me, I kind of went a different direction. For me, it's Zach Horstmeyer and Jeff Braxton, the newest coaches at early college high school at Delaware State and at First State Military Academy. And the reason was because it has nothing to do with football really on the field so far. It's that they inherit a completely clean slate. There is no history of winning at either one of these schools. There's no history of any kind of success at all. And I think you brought in two guys. Zach Horstmeyer was an assistant coach for a while at Cape Henlopen, I believe. Jeff Braxton, again, 30 plus years at the college level. I think these guys are going to walk into a situation. Both of them reported pretty good numbers for their camp, which were both an uptick from the year before. So I think these two guys, these two programs are the afterthoughts. No one gives these programs any thought, and they've not given anybody a reason to. These guys may start to change that a bit, where it doesn't even have to be a winning season. They just have to be competitive on the field. If you go back and look at the scores of both of these teams over the years, it's just, it's like men against boys. So I think Zach Horstmeyer and Jeff Braxton have the easiest job because they have nothing to live up to, anything they do. And I think both of them are going to be successful. Now, how you judge success is up to you, but I think because of the clean slate, they both are going to have a chance to build something on their own down there.
All righty. So good luck, guys with the toughest jobs and the easiest jobs. All right, we're going to talk. We got one more segment to go, and that's going to be our Grain Gridiron Top Performers of the Week. We always did our Top Performers of the Week in the past. And so hopefully by now, about Grain Restaurants. They're started by two local businessmen on Main Street in Newark. They've quickly grown to locations in Trolley Square at the Summit Marina on the C&D Canal, Lewis at the Ferry Terminal in Kennett Square, and the newest location on the Star Campus in Newark. I actually ate there the other day. Grain restaurants have become nightly or weekly hangouts for some, gathering spots for special occasions for others, or just a new place to try and usually return to. The menu has something for everyone, some usuals and some peculiars, but best of all, you never leave disappointed or hungry. I can vouch for that. My favorite part of Grain is knowing that it was started by two neighbors who had an idea, and that idea not only came to fruition, but has flourished. Marley, we need to come up with one of those ideas. And fortunately, they love sports and love supporting the community in a lot of different ways, and we appreciate their support of our podcast. Thank you, Jim O'Donohue and Lee Michaels. Now, we don't have any top performers this week because nobody's played yet. So what we thought we would do instead this week. Oh, and I should mention that the top performer, whoever it is, their head coach is going to get a gift card from a Grain restaurant, any of the Grain restaurants they want to go to. We'd love to give it to the top performer, but it's against the DIAA rules. And so we don't want to get anybody in trouble. So we're going to instead give it to one of the head coaches who had something to do with that person being the top performer to do that. And we appreciate Grain donating the gift cards for that. So Marty, we decided real quick just to do what we think are our most important position on the football field in high school. I'll let you go first.
For me, it's quarterback, and here's why: the offenses are changing in high school football. They're becoming more and more of a West Coast type, a passing offense. But more than that, it's that the quarterback is the general on the field. They need to be able to direct people. I was watching games, thinking back to last year with Austin Troyer at Middletown, Ryan Storage, Salesianum, Jonathan Tyndall, Lake Forest. These guys are directing traffic. They're asking guys to come in motion. They've got to know every position on the field. Now, back in the old day, I went to St. Elizabeth's. Joe Hempel was, handed off right, handed off left. You didn't really have to do too much. The quarterbacks today are asked to do a lot, including in some cases, I know that two schools specifically, the quarterbacks are responsible for protection, for setting the protection at the line. So I think it's evolving, and I know where you're going with this. And I think as we keep going forward and forward, which I guess we don't really have a choice, quarterback is really where the emphasis is going to be. Some of these schools are starting to bring in these great athletes, great arms. We didn't used to see that in Delaware. We're starting to see more and more of it now. So for those I think quarterback's the most important position on the team.
All right, I'm going to go with running back. Not that I think quarterback's not. That's, obviously you want to have a good quarterback, but I'm going running back because unlike in the NFL, you can win a state title with a good quarterback. It doesn't have to be a great quarterback. Let's face it, to win in the NFL, there's very few teams, maybe the Ravens, one of them, that have a quarterback that's not going to be in the Pro Football Hall of Fame. You can count on one hand the number of Super Bowl champions whose quarterback's not in the Pro Football Hall of Fame. Not that I'm comparing high school football to the Super Bowl, but it helps make my point a little bit more. Most state champs have one very good running back, if not two very good running backs. And sometimes those running backs are used for different things, not just running the ball out of the backfield. If you have a good one, they can line up in the slot, they can catch the screen passes, et cetera. So they can be multi-dimensional, like your quarterbacks too. But sometimes you have two running backs who are multi-dimensional. They also can block for the quarterback. So you've got to have a good running back who's willing to block for the quarterback, not only if they're dropping back to passing, but as we've seen in Delaware, more often than not, if the quarterback's rolling out to run with the ball or to have an option pitch. So I think why that's important. Now, here's a stat. I know you're big on stats, Marty. I might have outstatted you on this one for the first time in the program's history. In the last 2 years, 17 of the 24 touchdowns were in title games were done by running backs. So that's 71%. Now, I know everybody can argue, well, it was probably a 4-round scamper after the quarterback made 7 of 10 passes to get the team down there. And that could be the case. But still, 17 of the 24 touchdowns that were scored in state championships games in the last 2 years were done by the running back. So I'm going to go with running back. So again,
I love that stat, by the way. That's awesome.
Keep that tucked in your pocket for
that's
another podcast. So that's our Grain Gridiron top performers of the week, the running backs and the quarterbacks. But in the future, we will pick a player, a top performer player, and that head coach will receive a gift card from the Grain restaurants, and we appreciate their support. All right, the last news segment we're going to do is always going to be a quick one, Marty. Random thoughts, and I'll start. Here's my random thought. How generous was it of the University of Michigan to self-impose a penalty on their head coach, Jim Harbaugh, who's going to sit out the first 3 games of the regular season against teams that I could coach the Michigan Wolverines at, as long as the 2 assistants were with me, and still win those games. Now, this is after that there was going to be a 4-game suspension that was going to include a Big Ten game against Rutgers. That game would probably be about a 45-point spread in Vegas. So they were going to suffer through one conference game, but the committee at the NCAA said that was unacceptable. And so Michigan's reaction to that, and the committee, when the committee says it's unacceptable for him to sit for 4 games, it doesn't mean because the NCAA committee wants him to only sit for 2.
Right.
It probably means it's going to be more eventually. And I don't even know where that is, and I don't want to get hung up in that in here. But the bottom line is, how arrogant is it for the University of Michigan to respond to that committee's statement of basically saying, without saying it, 4 is not enough, to self-impose a 3-game suspension? And that is just ridiculous. It's ridiculous for Michigan. It's ridiculous that the NCAA hasn't determined what this penalty is going to be. Because from what I understand, and you follow college football a lot closer than me, this has already gone through the court systems, for lack of a better term. It's basically, even though he hasn't admitted it, Jim Harbaugh has basically admitted by offering this penalty that he wasn't truthful during an NCAA investigation about him recruiting people during the COVID times without getting knee deep into what this is all about. But I just think it is absurd that I think they should be embarrassed that their response when the NCAA basically said, no, 4 is not enough, they came back and said, okay, we'll do 3 instead. Yep. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong. You follow this much closer than me. Okay.
Here's the thing too. This 3-game suspension is a 3-day suspension because he is allowed to coach the team throughout the week, all 3 weeks. The only time he's not allowed to have contact with the team is game day. Now he's appointed, and they're making this kind of celebration. He's giving an offensive coordinator 1 game, a defensive coordinator another game, and he's giving 2 position coaches a half each in the middle game, where they will act as the head coach, which is absolutely ridiculous. But they've made a game out of this where, the NCAA is so afraid of being sued by these schools. That it used to be the NCAA was all powerful. Now these schools can sue them, out of existence. But I agree that to impose this penalty, but then to say, hey, he's still going to practice with the team all 5 days of the week or 6 days of the week, watch film with them every night, and sit out these 3 games. It's outrageous. And it kind of leads into one of mine, which is, I saw an interview with Kirby Smart yesterday on College Game Day, the Georgia head coach. They're 2-time defending national champions. They've had 11 kids cited for speeding since January 15th, including a fatal crash that killed 2 university employees, one of which involved Jalen Carter, the first-round draft pick of the Eagles. And in this interview, Kirby Smart said, and I want to get this quote right, I see my job not as much winning games as I do improving creating better men and citizens, which I thought was one of the funnier things I've ever heard a college head coach say.
So he's failing.
Georgia, not only that, but Georgia's not paying him $10 million a year to create better men and citizens. They're paying him $10 million a year to win national championships. I would love to know from college campuses how much time actual kids spend with their head coach, meaning one-on-one.
Right.
I've seen Deion Sanders, when he took over at Colorado, was just, and I'm a Deion Sanders fan, but when I've seen the way he treats some of the players, and I don't know if there's one on YouTube where he lets the team vote during a team meeting on whether kids should remain part of the team. And what the kids didn't know is that the kid was sitting right there. And the team voted him off, and Deion basically said, get your stuff and get out of here. Coaches have way, way too much power, but the sanctimonious stuff with, we're here to create, we're going to take care of your kid for the next 4 years. Kirby Smart, and obviously I don't know Kirby Smart. My guess is Kirby Smart couldn't care less whether any of those kids graduate. He cares whether they perform on the football field. And why? Because that's his job.
And he's getting fired if they don't.
Yes,
right.
Exactly. Which cracks me up because, as you know, schools can always fire coaches for cause. You know what for cause doesn't include at any level, high school, college, or pros? Winning games, which I will never understand. So if you want to fire a coach and not pay him, it has to be because he embarrassed the university or assaulted a kid. But if a guy goes 0-10 for 3 seasons and he's still got $20 million left on his contract, you fire him, you still got to pay him that $20 million. So the way they structure this with the student athlete, and it's such a joke. I'm glad the kids are cashing in now to some extent. This was an interesting thing real quick. Joe Burrow has a base salary of $940,000 this year. Arch Manning, who will be the backup quarterback at Texas this year, who is the nephew of Peyton and Eli, has a $2.1 million NIL deal for this year. So his base salary as the backup quarterback at Texas will be roughly $1.6 million more than Joe Burrow is making as the quarterback at Cincinnati this year. Now, I know people will say, well, Joe Burrow got a $24 million signing bonus. He did. And that's, we can argue about that. But the point is, it's crazy the way some of this stuff is going. And again, I don't begrudge the kids, and these companies are out there, but boy, we talked about the high school portal. the transfer portal in college is absolutely insane.
Yeah.
And it's basically you're buying players.
Yeah.
Miami has done it. USC has done it. Oklahoma has done it. You know, all these schools. And then they pretend, well, you know, we don't have anything to do with this. The kid comes here because he wants to come here.
Notre Dame quarterback. The Notre Dame quarterback I watched.
Sam Hartman. Yep.
5th year. You think he went there? You think he's not getting paid a few bucks to be there?
That's right. The mountain man with his the beard and good Lord. And I did have one thing, and one thing additionally I wanted to say, or two things real quick. One thing is a real good one. Kyle Custis, the tight end for God, I lost it off the top of my head there, but I think it's Cape Henlopen, collected backpacks and school supplies for children in need. And that's just something I think we need to celebrate. You know, we saw a couple times last year where players were doing different things to try to help their community, and I love that. Second thing was, and this is high school football related somewhat, but ECHS had a media day a couple weeks ago, early college high school at Delaware State University. They posted a bunch of pictures to Twitter and Facebook. The pictures are of these kids, and they're all with the Chucky doll from the Child's Play movies. And I have to know, what is the story with the Chucky doll? And it's funny, Benny Mitchell replied and said, it's kind of like the kangaroo at Wilmington Friends. And he's right. There's no rhyme or reason to these things, but I need somebody at ECHS. I know they don't get a lot of press, but we gave them a good bit today. You got to get back to me about what is the deal with Chucky from Child's Play being in all these pictures with your football players. So
that's funny. And you're aging yourself, Marty, that we know who Chucky is.
That's right.
All right. Those are our random thoughts today. One last one for me. Name, image, and likeness. Put a cap on either the player or the team and make it sort of like the salary cap in professional sports. Each college has X number of money that they can claim as name, image, and likeness money. And you decide whether the Manning kid's getting all of it or whether you're going to divvy it up to other people. That might be the only way to get this thing under control. Otherwise, it's going to be crazy out of control in the next several years. All right, that's going to do it for this week's episode. Thanks to our sponsors, the Grain Restaurant and their 5 locations, the Marticelli Restaurant Group and their 3 restaurants, Mary Kate Johnston with ReMax Associates, and Dan Rigby, author of the Win the Day Planner, and, of course, Diamond Hill Inc. And, of course, the presenting sponsor of the podcast, websitesforsports.com. That's websitesforsports.com for all your high school coverage needs for scheduling, coaches, rosters, etc. Don't forget to follow us on Twitter and Facebook, and please like and share our podcast to help us spread the word about the wonderful sport of high school football here in Delaware. Until next time, for Marty Sheehan, I'm John Busby. Have a great sports week.